Hey everyone, this is Matt, and I wanted to bring to your attention June 3rd's meeting in regards to Godley Station HOA to POA amendment and what was held at this time. For the most part, this video is straight through as its entirety, so please keep in mind that there will be another video following this up in regards to a questionnaire recap to streamline a lot of the discussions that took place, but the board wanted to showcase the meeting as its entirety. So please sit back, enjoy, and grab some popcorn for this excitement. Hope you enjoy.
Good evening, everybody. We're glad you came to this in-person meeting tonight. Is the sound going to be okay?
Yeah, I can hear
Okay. Good deal. Thank you. This is our interim PA system. So anyway, tonight we've got our association here to talk about this Property Owners Act that we're trying to share out with the association and talk about a little bit, explain some of the benefits of that. I wanted to let the board that's here tonight introduce themselves. I'm Scott Fairchild. I'm the current president at Village of Godley Station.
I'm David Lights. I'm on Magnolia Drive, and I'm one of the at-large board members.
I live on East Dogwood Lane.
Rob Coker, Vice President, live on Delta.
I'm Andy Pizzello,
And
I'm Sandra Goley. We live on East Dogwood.
Ken Baldwin, I'm the secretary, I live on Pink
That's right.
so tonight, once we do get to some of the questions and answer sessions, if we do have questions, I'd just like to ask you to at least state your name and you know what street you live on, so we can sort of get an idea of where we're at. And other than that, we have our attorney here tonight, Evan with Dunlop and Gardner. He's going to be facilitating the meeting for us and presenting, and we have a lot of questions that we've captured already from everybody, and we'll just get started with this and turn it over to Evan.
All right, thank you. It's really good to be here tonight with y'all. Again, my name's Evan Bernard, one of the attorneys at Dunlop Gardner that represents the association. First, it's awesome that y'all are here. The biggest problem that I face when I'm working with boards on trying to amend their covenants is a lack of participation. So the fact that we got everybody here tonight is really, really good. I have 34 questions and statements to address. So if you have a question, if you just hold it to the end, one, it most likely will probably get answered in this 34. And then if y'all are still awake after all 34 of these and have questions, we'll take one at a time out there for as long as that takes, or as long as y'all can stay. I'm going to sit down because I can't read from up here. But again, I'll go through these. If for some reason I start trailing off, volume goes down, you can't hear, just let me know, okay? All right, so the very first question I have is, it's actually a statement. If we adopt the POA Act, our money will be grouped with other communities run by the POA. Therefore, there's no guarantee that our funds are used in VGS. Also, fees can increase without warning. So I'll address both of these. The first part, I don't know where this is coming from, honestly. It's actually, in doing this for years and years and years, the first time I've ever heard that come up. The reason why is it's simply not true. It's not a group. You don't join anything. You are simply agreeing to be bound by a set of statutes, right? An act. Enacted by the Georgia legislature. This is the same thing as when you became an association. By becoming a nonprofit organization, a homeowners association, you agreed to be bound by the Georgia Nonprofit Corporations Code. So if you adopt the POA, you will then be subject to the POA as well. The difference is that the nonprofit code is for all types of nonprofit organizations, not homeowners association, property owners association. And the POA Act, the Georgia Property Owners Association Act, I'm going to call it the POA Act over and over again tonight, was designed specifically for associations. As far as the fees increasing without warning, that's not accurate. The fees, your dues, have nothing to do with the POA Act, if you adopt it or not. It has to do with what are the association's budgeted costs for the upcoming year. That's how the budget gets set. That's how the fees get established. Also taking into consideration reserves for things that you might need in the future. So it has nothing to do with fees increasing. The second statement is there's no financial benefit to our residents, only developers and politicians trying to get more money from hardworking people for their own interests that will not stay in our neighborhood. There will be higher dues, assessments for projects outside of our own neighborhoods that will be automatically assigned to our residents to pay and more. So again, I just don't know where this is coming from. It's not true in any way, shape, or form. The developer that started Godley Station is no longer part of it, right? So there's no developer in play here. I'll keep the politicians out of it because it doesn't have anything to do with politicians. But you all put your assessments into a pot, right? That pot stays here. That's the only way that the association is able to fund anything is from your own dollars and cents, right? That can't leave the association unless you all say, hey, we're going to donate to some cause or something like that. But typically associations don't do that. Money stays here for association things. There cannot be any outside projects. The outside projects are what you get taxed on, and I can't do anything about that anyways from your local government and state government. But yeah, that has nothing to do with the POA Act, okay? Next statement is a POA might cover one neighborhood, an entire town, or multiple towns. It could also focus on one delineated area, like a historic district or golf course. A POA or ROA might encompass one or more HOAs or COAs. Again, not accurate. You are the Villages of Godley Station. You are staying in the Villages of Godley Station. Your name doesn't change. Nothing changes. You're not association with any other group. There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of homeowners associations throughout the state of Georgia, property owners associations that are subject to the POA Act. They are not together, right? Have nothing in common other than they are subject to this group of statutes.
In the course of time, are there multiple of these questions?
No.
That
So
cover the same, because if there are, I'm comfortable, I don't know about the rest of you, I'm comfortable saying asked and answered.
No. There are variations on the questions, right? So I want to make sure I address anybody that had a slight variation of the question. But no, I didn't just grab it and all of that.
Can I ask, did you actually present the rationale for this at the beginning? I walked in like 2 minutes after.
And so why I would never suggest to boards, and sometimes they do this, and it's typically in smaller communities where a small group of people say, we don't want any leasing in here ever for any reason whatsoever. And sometimes that passes, sometimes it doesn't. But that's why you put a percentage in place, and the hardship part of that too. It's like,
we're sitting at 20%. I may get on a wait list and wait 5 years before I turn my property.
in theory, absolutely, that could be possible. But in that scenario, you could reach out to the board and say, hey, this was my intent all along. Can I get a hardship permit? And they could absolutely say yes. Because you're not an investment company.
So you want a boat swing, it's possible to get that stuff put in prior to, or is that one of those things like you say, you can't get put in prior to if you're not until the POA?
Say that one more time.
Say, if you get with the board, you say, the things that we can write in for current homeowners petition, say, I want to be on here, here's my intent, the next 15 years to your rental, I want to turn it off in. Is that something that you can put in place?
No,
prior to the
we can't do it yet.
POA?
What we would like to do,
Yeah, we'd be happy to have like some of the things.
what we would like to do is basically to say no investment companies can be in here, right? That's the ultimate goal. Is investment company you can't buy.
I agree with that.
That's not right. If it was, that's what we would say, right? You can't just say you can't buy. So we can put these provisions in place. Yeah, if you were worried about the percentage, but again, you have that backup in place, the hardship permit that could go above and beyond the caps that would allow you to do that. Yeah.
That would be a hard.
Could be. Why not? If a board asked me, could that be a hardship? Yeah, why not? All right, this gentleman that heard of you.
I had a question with how the HOA currently works. It was, a little bit ago, you said like if 90% of us voted yes, we would all be beholden, under the current HOA rules, we would be beholden to the leasing agreement, to not lease. But the 10% that didn't vote or voted no wouldn't have to abide by it, correct?
That's right.
Okay, so those 10 plus, in that example, the 10% you had that voted no.
And let me clarify, that's for a greater restriction.
Yeah, for a greater restriction. So the 10% that voted no, what happens when they sell the place and there's a new owner? Is the new owner now beholden to what we did, or are they grandfathered in?
No. The question is, that lot is not bound by that restriction. Or the answer is, that lot is not bound by that restriction. Ever.
Okay, so
Yeah,
any owner of my property previously that voted no on a extra restriction, if I found out about it, I wouldn't have to follow it.
That's right.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
All right, right here.
Hi, my name's Charlotte. I'm a resident here for 19 years, served on the last board. I've also been a city planner for about 30. And so I'm used to writing regulations and, controversial topics and what you need to do to get people together before you actually have a vote. And so I have to say I'm a little disappointed how this has happened, that we have the ballot going out before we've had discussion and potential to understand this better and perhaps change some language. I am concerned, as this gentleman is, about my retirement. I've stayed in this community because my home is an investment and I want to be able to rent it out. But it sounds like we have to have the POA first approved, and then maybe a board will put something in the covenants where I can lease. And this seems to be...
Not the board, that would be all.
Well, that's not going to happen. And so now I've been here for 19 years knowing I could do this, and now it's completely up in the air. And this is what turns me off about this particular amendment. I also think it's going to be difficult to sell a house. If people want to buy and knowing that they can't lease, we'll never see any military in here. We'll never see Gulfstream people in here who move around, or other people who might move in here that have to travel. If I need to go take care of parents out of state, if I want to travel for an extended period of time, I may not be able to do this now because we're so concerned about American homes for rent. Those investment companies are now pulling back out of neighborhoods and they're building their own communities because there's economies of scale by being able to rent out an entire community that they can control. Not this individual here, there, everywhere, all over town.
Yeah, to clarify, we can't change anything with the POA. You are either bound by it or not, right?
Well,
so
I mean,
this amendment only is adopting the POA Act and the initiation fee, right? And changing the provision on the amendment provision.
For me, it's a risk, and it's a little too risky for me. And then I also want to add too that it looks like the amendment is just adopting state law and then attaching it to our covenants. But there's discussion in our covenants about assessments. There's some language that I find contradictory with the POA language, including definitions. And go ahead.
No, I didn't mean to cut you off. So if you look at a lot of the language in the POA Act, it says to the extent provided in the covenants, right? And so there's a lot of things that, if not in the covenants, it's still not applicable to you even if you adopt the POA. Well, this amendment is what it is. We'll get to the leasing part when we get to it, but talking about all that and trying to nail down what that's going to be exactly doesn't really matter at this point because if you don't adopt the POA Act first, you can't, right? So
and for me, that's just the biggest.
Step two, right? So, but to your question, to your statement about the POA Act and the covenants conflicting, the POA Act controls when there's a conflict, right? Like we talked about the 10%, that would take 10%. If it specifically says that, but you'll see in there, and this is common language in like the nonprofit, but a lot of times it says to the extent provided in the declaration. I'll give you an example. It says to the extent provided in the declaration of the POA Act, you can fine for violations of the covenants. Because your covenants provide that you can fine for violations, you can fine for violations after adopting the POA. It's like an easier thing in court basically to say, hey, look, they're subject to POA. There's no, it's crystal clear, they can fine, right?
But we're not going to see a red line copy of the POA, presumably if it got adopted, and then how the covenants might look if the POA were adopted.
No, you can't redline it. No, I mean, mean, it is, and the reason why I put it in, and I always suggest to put the actual statutory code in the amendment itself, is we could just have a statement, like, in what was sent out to you, just said the statement about adopting the POA, but if you look at the proposed amendment, it has every single statute in it, right?
Yeah, I understand.
And why I suggest doing that is so that members don't have to go try to pull statutes. They can just look at the document itself and say, what does the POA Act says? Again, there's not going to be much to reference, right? Because the main thing is that amendment.
I just think down the road it may get confusing if it is adopted, that people see assessment in the covenants and then there's assessment language in an amendment.
Well,
So there's potential for that.
Yeah.
But again, for me, I just find the whole thing risky for me, my financial future. And this is why it is a turn off for me and why I won't go for it.
well, I mean, my suggestion to you would be then if you're worried about the leasing part of it, this isn't the leasing part of it, right? So
But
this is just
again,
the
a POA
So what
has
if
to be
there's,
approved.
okay, so what if there is, 2 years from now, a need to add a great restriction that has nothing to do with leasing? That you really, really want in your covenants?
Well, too bad for me then.
You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? So if you're in your position, in my head, vote yes POA, no leasing.
But some of what's happened are management issues, whether or not it's HOA or POA. There's been inconsistency in management. And being on the board, I know it's thankless. I know these
Yeah,
guys have done a lot of things. What I have seen, you've got some members who are good at what they do, who have knowledge of being on a board, and some members who are just looking for something to do and know nothing about management. And I think where we are now is a result of just some bad management over the years and some
I'll say
bad
this.
boards.
Yeah, I'll say this. Again, we represent over 500 communities throughout the state of Georgia, HOAs, POAs, condo associations. This board is more involved and does more than about any other board that I represent.
I don't doubt that.
I'm not gonna say, promise you, I haven't said anything here tonight that is not the truth. I've said my opinion why I think you should adopt this. Take that with a grain of salt, but this board does more than most boards do, especially in a community this size. And apathy is a real problem. I've seen a lot of communities, and then they try to put forth stuff, and then members push back. It's just like, look,
I get it.
and
They've
that's
had
the
to make
problem.
that.
And it's
for a
because
while.
it's a volunteer position where nobody ever comes and says, thank you, everything's running good, right? You experience that because you're on the board. Nobody ever says, this is awesome, you're doing such a good job, thank you. It's, why is everything so messed up when there's a problem?
I just want to add, because I'm going to go back to him, and thanks all of you for doing this job, because technically it's for free or whatever, but I have to be with her and him, because it looks like you didn't come prepared. Because if at the beginning you start saying that some of your customers, when you meet with them, it was too late for them to implement the POA because there were so many leases housed. We don't have that number. It is going to be too late for us already, and we are doing a change that is not necessarily that we don't need to do because we don't have a number that is fundamental for us to decide, okay, we are borderline, we better go and make this happen. But right now we are in la la land because there's no numbers to tell us if we are late or we are really early to prevent us to be like those communities that you said that you were there and it was too late for them. So I think that the preparation and the information, the data that should be able here to display to us, all of us, is lacking, is missing, and that's why we are confused because we are like, okay, we are voting yes, it sounds great or whatever, but it's too late, and at the end we are stuck with whatever because we vote for something, we invest money in something that at the end is not going to be beneficial for us, or we are still on time because we are at 12%, 15%, and then we are like going to see the benefit at the long run. That's the main problem. The information, the data is not here. And you are making us vote in something that we don't have all the information on data to see if it's beneficial or not.
So in those communities that I'm talking about where it's too late, they don't know the exam. Nobody
How do you know that it's not too late for us because you don't know the numbers?
Because website, and I can see all the
So
owner
what is
occupied
the
lots. I don't know
percentage?
the exact percentage, but what I'm telling you is, yeah,
So just real quick, so like we said, we couldn't get the lease numbers, previous boards couldn't get the lease numbers, it was too large to get the cost, right? One of the things that's been happening recently because of this new pool, to get to the pool, you have to have the key card. To get a key card, you have to be registered with Century as a resident. To be a resident, either living here as an owner or a leasee, you have to give that information, right? So when now people come in the pool, they're saying, hey, we want to go to the pool, can we get in? And she checks the name, she's like, hey, this isn't the same name as the owner. Are you renting? The answer is, yes, we are. Okay, now, she said, okay, well, I can't get you this until you give me a lease, and we can start tracking it. Just this past week, we had 60 homes that have come in that are renters. Now we have that number. So 57 was the number. And just today was 7 alone, just today. So we're at close to 70 right there, right? And we're at 886 homes. So 10% is 90 homes, right? So we're just under that 10%.
But
That's just what we know.
And I understand that, but we are being paid a company that is not tracking all of that data. How long they have been the management?
Maybe I'm happy that nobody discloses it, man. That's
So you when you hire, because I understand that we get rid of the ladies that we used to have up there because we are paying more for a company that has the knowledge, the resources, or whatever. So if you are coming with this to us, the least that you can ask them is like, give me at least a percentage that I can give to them.
It's not
Like,
available.
okay, why not?
Because it costs
That's
$10,000 to get.
yeah, that situation.
You can't go door to
We
door
can
to
only
door.
go off of information that people disclose to us. We can't go on.
So I do tell you, okay, you say that for the key to enter, that we have been in that like more than 2 years, almost 2 years.
Yes.
So we didn't collect
We
that
did
information.
Stop, yeah, I mean,
Not every person has a key. Many people didn't have keys, they didn't give keys to their renters. There was no, they came, the pool had issues, right? They repaired those, and we've got a nice pool now, so people are coming through. Those people that they're counting, I believe, Sam, you could probably qualify this, but the additional people that are coming through that are renters, those are not the corporate renters. Those are not coming from corporations that have the property. We know they're renters.
No, 40 from last week were corporate. I've gotten 3 more since just sitting here. Those are private homeowners who haven't registered.
Okay.
So the 7.
yeah, so if this board was in place 10 years ago, and the pool like it was 10 years ago, they would have had that data 10 years ago. We're here now, so this board is doing what it can without spending the $10,000 to get the information and find anybody that's not providing the information back. So we're here now, right? The tax assessor has the information that it has. Let's try to address it. This guy's been asking, trying to ask questions.
I just want to say like 2 clarifications. So kind of related to my question before. So when the lady goes over there and started talking, it was the 2/3 vote. You're saying once the POA is in place, put in the lease restriction, it would take 2/3 vote to then implement that. It's not automatic with the POA.
That's correct, yeah. You would have to put specific language in your covenants. Two separate amendments.
And the second part of that is just to clarify for myself. The 2/3 is 2/3 of all homeowners, not just the voting participants.
2/3 of eligible voters. What I mean by that is, if you have 900 homes and 50 people are delinquent, haven't paid their assessments, it's the eligible voters is 850. It's not those who vote, it's 850. Right? That's how you establish the eligibility. No, that's from your covenants. Your covenants currently say 1/3 of the eligible, right? So same thing. So say there's 50 delinquent.
So that's what I'm
And it's
asking.
one, it's 850.
They vote 2/3, and it can't be changed. A lot of conversations earlier around that people felt that 1/3 was snuck in in 2018. Is that something that once the POA is in place, the 2/3 is the 2/3?
Yeah, if you look at that amendment provision of the POA, it says a minimum of 2/3 of the eligible owners in this. That's part of it.
Thank you so much for your time.
Of course.
She had a question.
Yeah, I have a question. Thank you for your time and good information. But honestly, I'm gonna be more concerned about what about the next door from down on Mill Street, from now until the time I do decide to move out, whatever that is, than I am about the retirement. You wanna move in renters next door to me because you want to retire today and you're gonna move somebody in. So whether it's the big company that's buying houses, or we've got the one here, one there, one there, that all want to start moving in their renters, I have an issue with that. That's what I have to say. Thank you.
Here, this.
Okay, thanks for coming tonight. I have a question I've been asking for several years here. I've asked the police department, I've asked the previous owner what can be done. My neighbor next door has bought a couple of homes, 2, 3 private, in his name. He is giving them out as a dormitory. They're supposed to be residential family unit homes here. So next door to me, I have a dormitory.
That's it. The question was, why did they say that? I have no idea. It's a really good question. I would like to ask him that myself. There's only one reason not to adopt it, in my mind ever, is if you are a developer that's building a community, you don't want to adopt it. And the reason why is the POA Act says, regardless if you're a developer or not, you can't avoid paying assessments, right? And so developers don't want to pay assessments on the lots that they're developing. It makes sense, right? So what they do is they don't adopt the POA Act. A lot of times they will leave in covenants. Unfortunately, we did not have this here, but then after they are gone and out of here, that the board can adopt the POA Act unilaterally without a vote of the membership. That makes it super easy for the association. Fortunately, that's not the case here, but that's why you would not adopt it if you were a developer developing an association. Other than that, there is no reason in my mind not to adopt it. The next one is, under the POA Act, the board has the power to amend the covenants and bylaws without owner approval. Similarly, I got a question that was, would a POA make it so that adjustments to the covenants and bylaws can be made more easily because the board's power is increased at the expense of the residents? So it's kind of misleading, right? So the only time the board could ever adopt an amendment to the covenants and bylaws after adopting the POA Act to change them without a vote of the membership is to reflect the changes in the POA Act. I'll give you an example, right? So the POA Act says that the association is capped at a 10% late fee and 10% delinquent interest per annum on unpaid assessments. It actually matches your covenants right now. That's exactly what it says. But say, for example, your covenant said 18% delinquent interest a lot due. If you adopted the POA Act, the board would have the power to change the covenants to say now it has to be 10%. They don't have to do that because the POA Act controls on that section anyways. That's the only time. Importantly, for the membership, here's what the POA Act says about amendments. And this is in OCGA 44.3.226. It says, except to the extent expressly permitted or required by other provisions of this article, the instrument, which means your covenants, shall be amended only by an agreement of lot owners of lots to which 2/3 of the votes in the association pertain, or such large a majority as the instrument may specify. So the truth about the amendment is, no, it doesn't make it easier. It's going to make it harder because under the POA Act, the minimum requirement to amend your covenants is 2/3 of the eligible voters. Right now it says 1/3 of the eligible voters. Why in the world would we want to increase percentage? I'll tell you that. The next question is, my biggest question is, if the POA Act allows more freedom on your personal home, does that mean my neighbors can paint their house hot pink? No. The POA Act does not provide you more freedom on your personal home or on your lot. It doesn't change the provisions of the covenants in any way. What it does, it allows you to add greater restrictions to your covenants by 2/3 vote instead of needing 100% vote. So I'll get into this on the next question. How did the POA Act better the legal remedies for leasing restrictions? So this is, in my mind, the whole reason of why you would want to adopt the POA Act, right? And it's a very, very good question. The POA Act itself doesn't change the leasing restrictions in your covenants. All it does is it allows you to add leasing restrictions to your covenants or anything else that would be considered a greater restriction on land or on a lot by 2/3 vote. So the question is, and it's a rhetorical question, so you don't have to answer, do you want your neighbors to be bound by the same restrictions? Obviously, yes, right? So if you were to go to amend your covenants, you said, right now we're going to take a vote to amend to add leasing restrictions that say nobody can lease in the association ever again, right? And the covenants now say 1/3 approval to amend the covenants, and 1/3 approves to amend, so we change our covenants. Well, that would eventually get thrown out because the problem is, if you're not subject to the POA Act, only the people that voted in favor of it would be bound by that restriction. So it's of no use, right? Because we want to make sure the people that didn't vote in favor of it are playing by the same rules. So very, very importantly, in the law that says that you have to get owner approval in order to add a greater restriction, the law is OCGA 44-560, in case anybody wants to know. The POA Act specifically states that that part of that statute, 44-560, is not applicable to associations who have voted and adopted and recorded an amendment subjecting themselves to the POA Act. Again, that statute is no longer applicable to you if you adopt the POA Act. So what that means is you can add a greater restriction to the lots in the community after you've adopted the POA Act and recorded that amendment by 2/3 vote. This is obviously the only way that you could add leasing restrictions, right? Investment companies, America's Home for Rent, I'll talk about them later. Nothing against them, but they have a large presence. They're not going to vote to add leasing restrictions to lots, right? Of course not. But you want leasing restrictions binding on their lots, right? And anybody else that might want to lease in the future. So the only way to add these restrictions is to adopt the POA Act first. This is the greatest power of the POA Act. If this is the only reason you adopt it, that's perfectly fine because that's why you want to adopt it, right? This is 98% of the way there of why you would want to adopt it. There's some other things. It can help fill in some gaps in your covenants if there are any. And there's other things that, that are good that specifically deal with homeowners association, property owners associations, unlike the nonprofit code. But the greatest power is you can bind all lots to a greater restrictions by 2/3 vote. Okay? So that's why we're doing this. Another question, and it's a really good question, is why would you want to change the leasing restrictions? Because you do have some leasing restrictions in your covenants. In my mind, this too is also simple. Because when the covenants were drafted, and this is often sometimes, and there's no guarantee that this won't be the case in 10 or 15 years from now, right? When the covenants were drafted, there wasn't a prevalence of these very large investment companies coming up and buying large portions of your communities and taking up a ton of voting rights and voting powers in homes in your communities, right? That wasn't the case. When I first started doing this, it wasn't to prevent investment companies. It was just in communities that were wanting to add leasing restrictions just so that they wouldn't be predominantly leased communities, right? And the reason why, there's several reasons why, but one of the reasons why you don't want to be predominantly leased is because property values go down. Another reason why is because, say you have 50% rentals in here, you're never changing your covenants ever again, as long as it stays above that. I had a community a couple of years ago that came to me and said, hey, our covenants haven't been changed in 35 years. We're desperate to change them. By the way, we're at 90% leasing. What can we do? And I said, I'm sorry to tell you this. There is absolutely nothing you can do unless all these people sell their lots. Because half of them, they didn't even know how to contact these people, right? And it was PO boxes and shell corporations and all these people that they had never hear a word from. And by the way, had a hard time getting assessments from as well. So you have to stop it before it gets to that, right? And so then from there, it changed from just wanting to cap it to a percentage to, oh my gosh, the prevalence of all these investment companies, America's Home for Rent, Progress Residential, Tricon, Zillow, Divvy, Open Door, all these companies that have just started buying up crazy amounts of homes in communities. By the way, this is all I do all day, every day. I live, breathe, sleep this stuff. So I'm constantly thinking about it. I see the trucks going up and down the road. That's all I'm thinking about leasing restrictions all the time. Okay. Probably not the most exciting life, but it's my life. So why would we want to, going back to the question, why would we want to change the lease restrictions? Well, right now, there's no restrictions preventing, say America's Homes for Rent wanted to come in here and buy 150, 200 lots. There's nothing that would prevent them from doing so. As long as they provided a copy of the lease and it has a certain lease time period on it, there's nothing that prevents them. What happens then? If they want to run the board, they got the votes. If you want to change your covenants, too bad. It's not going to happen, right? And it's not just them. I say them because I just happened to look up to see how many homes they have in a particular part of your community. It's a lot. I'll get there, but it's a lot. So what can we do to change that? I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but once you're subject to the POA Act, you could amend and add a leasing cap so that you can always make sure that no matter what, you have enough owners that live in the community that can vote to change your covenants if something arises, right? The market changes, we need to address something. 25 years ago, we didn't need to address daily rentals, Airbnbs, VRBO, any of that, right? And then that popped up and the boards were scrambling like, what the heck do we do? Because we have all these parties and everything that's going on and property being tore up and we don't know who's coming in our community. So we had to adapt from there, right? So we have to sometimes change with the times. We want to make sure that you all can say, hey, we need to address this issue in our community. We're going to amend our covenants to do so. So we got to make sure that the rentals are at a level that's below that where we can do so. Another thing that would be a part of a leasing amendment is a residency requirement of, say, a year, right? And what I mean by that is, in order to apply for a permit to lease your lot, you have had to live in your home for a year. Why would we do that? An investment company can't live in the lot for a year. So what are they going to do when they come in and they're coming to buy and they look at your covenants and they see that? They're going to go down the road. That's what I changed when I had these issues where they were buying up all these lots. And the only time I've ever had an investment company come to me after that change was made was that they looked at the covenants, didn't see leasing restrictions, closed on the property some 4 or 5 months later, didn't go back and look, and in the meantime we changed the covenants and added the residency requirement and said, hey, can we get a hardship permit? It's like a giant nationwide investment company. The board's like, oh, no thanks. Okay, so they sold their home, right? This prevents investment companies from coming in and buying up all the properties. They can't comply with that, right? You all can comply with that if you want to lease your lot. Have you lived in a property for 6 months or a year, whatever the number is, right? Yes. I see a question back there. Probably came in at the end. I got. Do what?
That our amendments and covenants and bylaws can be amended to reflect
Yes.
the status of
Yes.
the capital renting and all of that.
Yeah.
So let's do it. The POA necessarily would not be required.
Yeah, so I don't know if you came in late, but again, if you'll just hold the questions to the end, I'm probably going to get to your questions. It doesn't matter if your covenants say you can do all this. The law doesn't say you can do this, right? You have to get owner approval to add what's known as a greater restriction on a lot. The Georgia Court of Appeals has already said, by the way, in case you want to go back and give you a couple cases, leasing restrictions are absolutely, positively a greater restriction on land, right? There's no questioning whether, well, maybe we could get around this. No. The Court of Appeals said absolutely, if you're adding, which makes sense. When I say a greater restriction on lots or lands, what I mean is, could you do something before that you cannot do now? If we are adding something to the covenants that says you can't do that anymore, that's a greater restriction on your lot. We need to be subject to the POA Act first in order to add that to be binding on all lots, right? That's what this whole thing's about.
Excuse me. I have a question. What about those in the military that you can buy a house and then next month you got to leave and you haven't got a year?
We'll get there. We'll get there. We'll get there. Yeah. I promise you, I got so many questions. If you'll just wait, we'll get there. So that's why you would want to do this. Again, when there's a high percentage of rentals, and I'll just tell you from my experience, the property values go down. If they own all these lots, like I said, they can take over the board. You know, I've had a bunch of these communities come to me and say, hey, we want to change, but we're at 40% leasing. And again, I have to tell them at that point, sorry, it's too late, right? We'll monitor it to see if they go down, but for now, it's too late.
What's the percentage? No question. Not till the end, okay?
It's okay. And I understand that this is very important because we're talking about your property value, what you're doing.
He's gonna say 40% in that neighborhood, what are we at? You should include that in your statement.
Address that.
Yeah, again, just bear with me, please. The next question was, limiting rentals here, while possible with a POA, won't stem the tide of corporate takeover of housing in general. How will the POA stop that? Again, this residency requirement would prevent them from being able to buy lots in here in the future. The law also states that if you're leasing at the time of the leasing amendment, you can't prevent that person from leasing in the future, right? The amendment is not applicable to them, which makes perfect sense because there was a terrible case where basically it's always bad fact patterns. You know, an elderly gentleman was renting his house for like 20 years. The association passed an amendment saying you couldn't lease anymore. And they told him he had to kick his tenant out. He didn't have any other. He couldn't hear. Anyways, so the Court of Appeal said, no, you can't do that, right? So the law states that it doesn't affect those that are currently leasing until the property sells for at least $100, right? So it can't be like a family transfer. Then it's applicable to the lots that are leasing at that time. The next question is, I don't fully understand the POA, but just looking from the definitions, they thought there was an undisclosed ulterior motive. Somebody was wanting to build in the neighborhood that isn't possible as an HOA. I'd like to know those exact plans. They have a feeling that someone is trying to pull strings and profit off, and it won't be us. Again, y'all are built out, right? The developer's gone. Nobody's trying to pull strings. This is simply so that you can add greater restrictions to your covenants. Plain and simple. The next question is, what will the initiation fee be and go to? So this is the biggest no-brainer ever to me. It's a very good question. Initiation fees are so prevalent throughout the state. I can't believe they weren't in your covenants before. My suggestion to the board, and they agreed, is setting a max of 200% of whatever the annual assessment is. This is pretty typical. Every dime that's collected is one less dime you all have to pay, right? And there's no magic money tree. It's all coming from y'all. So it can go to the reserve accounts, and it's fees that members don't have to pay in the future, right? It's just more money coming into the association's pot. Yeah, so the question is, can you explain what an initiation fee is? It just means that when someone purchases a lot within your community at closing, they have to pay. So say they pay $400,000 on the property. Part of the mortgage tacked on is going to be 2% of the assessment, so roughly $1,500. It's going to be a part of their loan. The association is going to get a check for that money. Money y'all don't have to pay for. Not a single one of you, right? Because it's only coming in from the new, and it's built into the mortgage over 30 years, so they don't care. Nobody ever cares. You wouldn't want to do something.
To the new homeowner, the person trying to buy.
Do what?
Is that fair to the person trying to buy?
Absolutely, it's fair. They're getting the benefit of coming in and having these amazing amenities. It's absolutely fair. Yeah, and it doesn't affect people wanting to buy properties, right? It's a rounding error. I had a community last year that was amending their covenants, and it wasn't in their covenants. They're just down the road from y'all. The first year it got them $48,000. So we're not talking $1,000 here, $1,000, real money. That's $48,000 that association. Those members didn't have to pay for their projects.
Do they have to come to a meeting and learn about it?
Nope.
What does initiate mean in that sense?
It means if you want to buy a lot and be a member of the Village of Godley Station, that fee has to be paid at closing. Yeah, simple as that.
But initiate that has a meaning.
Yeah. You become initiation as being a member of. When you buy a lot in the community, you become a member automatically, right? Every single one of you, if you own property within here, is a member of the association. So all that does is say, now you got to pay a small fee to be a member of the association and close. Really, really, really good for you, right? It's free money that y'all don't have to pay.
Excuse me,
Current owners are grandfathered in.
No, again,
You
yeah,
don't
this
have
is,
to pay.
this, no. This is just at the sale, transfer of a lot, and it's only from the buyer, the purchaser, not the seller, not you all.
have you coordinated that answer with the board? At the last board meeting in May, it was stated that no matter what the savings are, I'm not asking a question, I'm asking him to coordinate with the board what it was said, what was said at the last meeting.
Order. We need order.
We need to just let
Yeah.
our
Yeah.
meeting be presented, and then we will get to the open question and answer and comment section. Okay?
And by the way, if we run out of time at the very end, you have questions, I'll stay. You can come ask me a question. I don't mind answering the questions, right? You know, it's very simple. New members, when they purchase your lot, have to pay that to the association. Somebody's, right?
It's a tax to move here.
It's a tax to move here. That's exactly.
That's all it is. You don't pay it.
Can we have order, please?
Yeah. POA, I heard they look out for property owners with bigger incomes, probably get more favorable decisions made for them. I have no idea where this comes from. Everybody pays the same assessment, right? Your covenants don't state anything. Occasionally, I see some really weird covenants where there's tiny lots, and then there's lots that are several acres, and then those people pay it based on acres. Y'all don't have anything like that.
No.
You would have to approve that. Nobody's trying to change that. No, everybody's treated exactly the same, right? That's the beauty of this thing. You all have to pay the same exact amount. Statement was, a POA would just let them take your home for non-payment of dues. So this, I'm going to spend a little time on this again. Just let me get through it. This is kind of a hot button thing because there is a thing under the POA called judicial foreclosure of liens. The interesting part about this is, and this is used sometimes as a scare tactic as a way to not pass this for members that are scared about it. Very, very important to this. The exact language that's in the POA that talks about judicial foreclosure, that's already in your covenants, right? The board's not taking people's houses. Article 9, Section 9.8. I'm going to read the very relevant parts of this section. Again, this is in your covenants right now. The association shall have a lien against each lot to secure payment of delinquent assessment. Such lien, when delinquent, may be enforced by suit, judgment, and judicial or non-judicial foreclosure. Right? So that's already there. So it's not like the association can overnight just foreclose on lots. While the POA Act does allow for judicial foreclosure of liens in excess of $2,000, this is already the power that exists in the covenants. And by the way, it's a good thing, right? You don't want somebody in here that the association can't collect on, that thumbs the nose at the association, that parks 20 vehicles in their grass, and the association doesn't have a way to enforce anything against them, right? Because if that person, here's the ugly truth of all this, if that person doesn't have an income that's garnishable, the association can lien the lot, but they can't garnish them. If say their only income is a protected income, the association has no remedy, right? And so they can say, I don't care, I'm driving down everybody's property values, I want to do whatever I want to do with my lot, I want to paint pink, right? That power is important in those cases. You say, no, you're not, right? You want to be able to enforce the covenant so your property values stay up. And foreclosure takes forever. There's like news reports. I saw one recently. A lady said they took my house, the association took my house overnight. I didn't even know it was sold until it was after it sold. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm in court every day, right? I understand how this works. First, you have to send a certified letter. They have to get the letter. Then they have to file a lawsuit. Then they have to serve it. Then they have to go to court. There's a discovery period of 6 months. Then they have to get an order. Then they have to advertise it. Then they have to sell it. It's like over a year with so many notifications. These people that, hypothetically, that would do that to the association, say, I'm not playing by the rules, I'm not paying, you all got to pay my share, I'm not paying anything, which I see sometimes where, unfortunately, I've had associations that weren't subject to the POA Act and didn't have that in their covenants. And they had members in there, the board obviously want to say it, they've been in there 20 years and never paid a dime, right? And the assessments have to go up to cover their share, right? We don't want that. And the association could lien it and honestly hope they sell or die, if we're being honest, right? But that was the only way the association would ever get them out of there or get the money paid. And so with that, that is super important for y'all. And the association can't just say we got it, right? It's very complex litigation. It's a whole big deal.
But that's already in our code.
It's already there, right? The exact language is already in. Right? So don't worry about that. And also, if you pay your assessments, it's literally impossible. A POA will let them increase dues and impose mandatory assessments in order to pay for projects. I put this back in here just because I wanted the part about increasing the dues and impose the assessments. I already touched about the outside projects. That can't happen. The assessment is before and after this, solely based on your budget, right? And say, for example, not this board, a future board, a bad board, says we're going to charge you all $10,000 a year in assessments because we want to build an amusement park or something crazy, right? You aren't left like, well, I guess I got to cut a $10,000 check. No, you have a couple different remedies. One, you could vote down the budget, or two, you could say, no, we're going to kick you off the board, right? Which you should do in that case, right? And so you would call a special meeting, kick them out because they're trying to build an amusement park and charge $10,000, right? So you're not left with one remedy list. But regardless, the assessments are set by the budget. It has nothing to do with POA. How is the POA in the best interest of the neighborhood when it's only concerned with education of the community in regards to real estate planning and such as development? Again, it's nothing to do with development, everything to do with preventing investment company takeover. Somebody asked for a cap, a 10% cap in a 12-month period for annual assessments as a safeguard to all homeowners. So I would strongly advise against this, and the reason why is because I've seen associations that had this, and the realistic thing is, when we don't have inflation like this that we're having now, a lot of times assessments will stay stagnant for a long period of time. And if you had a board that was asleep at the wheel for a 10-year, 15-year period like I did in the community, and never changed the assessments, and then they had a cap, and their cost for the year went up about 40%, and they were capped at 10% to go up, and then they were like, we don't have any money. So they all just wanted to quit, right? Because they didn't have any money to fund the association. Bad stuff starts happening. Pool gets closed, that kind of thing, right? We want to be able to anticipate if costs drastically go up, we have to be able to make changes with that. Again, if the board does something that you don't like, that's not fit within the budget, you have remedies. So that's why you would want to do that. I've seen it just cripple associations, basically bankrupt them, where they couldn't do it. And then nobody wanted to serve on the board because they don't want to be the bad guy, right? So that's why we would want to do that. Stating currently the covenant state an amendment can happen with 1/3 affirmative eligible votes by the homeowners. Moving to the PO would increase it to the affirmative rate of 2/3 of the eligible votes, like I talked about. So if the village's home count is somewhere between 900 and 1,000 homes, a worst case scenario would mean 667, more like 900, would need to be approved a change in order to pass it. As you know, voter apathy is rather high regardless of the type of election, HOA, national, local. In my opinion, there is an unobtainable number. That is an unobtainable number for passage of anything. If converting to a POA eliminates our ability to self-govern in this area, then maybe we should reconsider. Similar to that, some possible misinformation is noted on page 3, last paragraph of the mail document, which states the law in Georgia states that in order to amend our covenants to add a greater restriction to lots, must have owner approval 100%. That is incorrect, as noted. It's 1/3. Have I misunderstood? Again, I touched on this before. We got to adopt the POA Act to be able to have these greater restrictions. And yes, it does take it to 2/3 of the eligible voters, right? People that are delinquent don't have a vote, nor should they, right? If you're not paying your assessments, you shouldn't be voting. And 2/3 is a high percentage, right? The law says that's what we got to get, right? You all are here tonight. It's a lot of people. I show up at some of these meetings sometimes to 5 people. I've showed up to one, there's one homeowner there. It's a pretty big community, by the way. They're not getting an amendment passed. And 2/3 of your membership is a lot, right? It's too much for the board to simply go out and ask you and mail something out and ask to get it returned. It takes a big effort. Your board has put forth a big effort to do this. With help from the members, you absolutely can get it passed. I've seen communities this size pass them. All it takes is members saying, yes, I want to make sure that I protect my property values, that we don't have an investment company take over in our community, and you can get it done. I promise you, you can. It just takes effort, right? Unfortunately, I have communities where they don't listen to me sometimes, and they just mail it out to the members, cross their fingers, close their eyes, and hope that it passes. It never does, right? But if you are proactive and you tell your neighbor, hey, this is something we need to do. Here's why we need to do it. We're trying to make sure that this stays owner occupied. We can still lease our lots if we need to. And these investment companies don't take over. We can control our community. We can make sure that our property values keep going up instead of going down. Get their votes. Very possible. Somebody said, rentals, yes, an eye needs to be kept on this from getting out of hand. What are the current numbers of rentals? How's that number determined? Maybe exceptions can be made on a case-by-case basis for hardships for homeowners. You absolutely want to keep an eye on it before it gets out of hand, which is why the board's wanting to act now. So just for this meeting, I went to your tax assessor's website. I pulled up the arbors at Godley just to see. I wanted to see what America's Home for Rent had in that section, right? So this was out of 661 lots. One company, America's Home for Rent, had 20 of the 661. Like I said, there are so many investment companies, right?
But
So
we
if
have
you're going to
900
do
lots.
something,
We have 900 lots in the community, right?
yeah, this was just the arbors.
Okay.
But if you pull it up on the tax assessors, they, like if you go neighborhood by neighborhood,
I know.
they are, yeah. So I just looked at the numbers, just because I just wanted to give you a number tonight of how many this one company has in this one section of the community. And obviously that's all I needed to see, right? The time to act is now if you're going to do something. And part of the hardships, and there was a statement about that before, yeah, anytime I do a leasing amendment in a community, I tell the board, we have to put a hardship clause in here, right? The purpose of this is not to prevent members from leasing, right? The purpose is to prevent investment companies, right? So what you would do is you would set a cap on the number of total lots that could be leased, investment or otherwise. 15% is a good number in my head, but whatever the number comes to is fine. And then from there, you also have a hardship clause. And there will be some of the types of hardships defined in there, what it could be, but we don't want to define and limit it to a certain thing, right? Because different hardships could pop up and we could say, well, that's not specifically in the covenant, so we're sorry, our hands are tied. No, we don't want to do that, right? But the military deployment is a perfect example. You have to, it doesn't have to be something, even like that. It could be, hey, I got to take a job for 3 months on the other side of the country. Can I lease it for, get a hardship permit until I come back? Yeah, sure. Or a death, right? Somebody dies and it's tied up in probate for a year and we don't want it to sit vacant, right? We don't want squatters. We don't want the issues that come with a vacant. So even if you're at your cap, right? This is the hardships apply when you're at your cap. You're at your cap. You can't have any more regular leases.
Can you elaborate on that, because the hardship, it still has to be voted on? So
That's right, yeah.
If I have a death and I want to rent it for X amount of time, the board still has to vote, and they do
Yeah,
have
absolutely.
to say no.
Yeah, they do have the absolute authority to say no. But that's why you have regular leasing too, and also why would the board want to deny a military deployment person from having a hardship? Why would they want to do that? If that gets out of the membership, the members are going to say, what do you do? Right? Of course. Again, this is to prevent the investments, right? It's not to prevent y'all. You have, like I said, you have to move. It's tied up in probate, whatever the case may be. The board has the power to then go above and beyond the 15 or whatever the percentage is to allow these permits, right? And it sets a process in place where the association can absolutely track and know who's leasing, right? Because the way the covenants are now, there's not really a good way to track it, right? Because it's, as many people that want to lease can. So putting this in place allows the association to know exactly who's leasing. And then if they lease without approval, of course, if an investment company comes in and leases without approval, the association has a remedy to take against them and say, no, you got to get out, right? Or we'll use the power that we talked about, and we can force them out, right? So that, like I said, the time to act is now, right? There was another question about the initiation fees. They didn't agree necessarily about the 200%. they were concerned about potentially, the reason why I'm bringing this back up is they were concerned about deterring a possible sale due to this figure. Again, it's really nothing more than a rounding figure in a mortgage on properties in your association, the value of your properties. It's not something they're going to have to come out and pay out of pocket, right, after they move in. Now you got to cut us a check. The closing attorney is going to send a check to the association. So again, there's absolutely no reason not to do that, right? Free money, what you want. Someone said it was ridiculous for the board to have the power to end the voting period earlier. I suggested the board put in there, right? The reason why is because the covenants require 1/3 of the vote to pass this. So if we get over 1/3, it's passed, regardless, right? And so every day that you wait, it's just another day with another investment company can come in here. So if we want to,
Please don't use scare tactics like that. I mean, I feel like you've already.
you can say it's. I'm not. But what, there is no benefit. There's no benefit if you were at 1/3, it's passed, right?
I want to know that it's bad.
And how
Because you got the balance there.
votes are counted fairly? That's my question.
Okay, so yeah, you got a third party counting ballots. If you're concerned, that's a whole nother topic. We'll get to questions at the end. Can the POA, this is a really good question. Can the POA be changed in the near future? So the question is, can the Georgia Property Owners Association Act be changed in the near future? I wouldn't say near future. Any law can get changed at any time, right? That's not up to us. That's to the Georgia legislature. The bill has to be proposed. House and Senate, Georgia House and Senate have to approve it. Then it goes to the governor's side, put into law. Anything in politics, legislators not fast. So yes, it absolutely can be changed. But we're going to know about it ahead of time if there is a proposed change to it. By the way, say that the POA, this is not going to happen. Say the POA Act said something crazy and they changed it to say something ridiculous, right? Well, then you could just vote to remove yourself from it. There's no reason to do that. It's not. All it is statutes made for associations.
I'm sorry, I just have to go back. I was going to wait because this isn't a question, it's a statement. You were saying 1/3 of the association has to vote for this change. Actually, according to 16, that's one that you're going to make a change on. And it says that 1/3 of the association was supposed to be involved at a meeting on a proposal to introduce this POA prior to.
Yeah. So.
Prior to a vote.
Yeah. So you have to approve it at a meeting. That's why meeting day set at the end of the voting period.
But when did the voting begin, please?
June 1st.
June 1st just started, right? So a voting period under the nonprofit code.
When did it begin?
June
We just meeting.
The Georgia nonprofit code provides that a voting period can be a maximum of 70 days. Right?
Excuse me, I'm not talking about a vote, I'm talking about a proposal to introduce the POA change. I'm not talking about a vote. I'm not talking, excuse me, I'm not talking about a voting period. I'm talking about the fact that 1/3 of this association was supposed to be involved in the proposal to change the HOA.
I'll address your question before Can they see all the bylaws that are being added? Just for clarity's sake, there's no change to the bylaws. You have your covenants and you have bylaws. Covenants are what run with the land, bind your lots, so the restrictions on the lot. Bylaws are what tell you how to govern yourself as an association, how you're supposed to hold meetings, what a quorum is at a meeting, that kind of thing. Boards confuse this all the time, right? So I wouldn't expect homeowners to know that. But your covenants are what are recorded in your county and what bind the lots and the restrictions. Bylaws are just how you govern yourself. But yes, I think they got copies of the full proposed amendment here, copies of the proposed covenant amendment online. The reason why the full one wasn't sent out to all of them is it would, I think, would have been over $1,000 in extra cost to the association. Obviously, the board wants to not waste your money, so yeah, that's why the full version of the whole statutory code wasn't mailed out to everybody. Question: will the city of Fuller still maintain the streets and sidewalks? Yeah. So roads aren't being bought by the city. If the board asked me, I'd say, no, don't do this. Never ever do this. If you're not gated in the very beginning, it's very, very hard to become a gated community. Typically, cities and counties require like anywhere from $500 to $1.5 million in a reserve account per mile in your community in order to deed the roads to you. They don't want them, right? They'll be happy to turn them over as long as you have the money to show that you can maintain them, because once they're yours, and all the problems above, below are yours, right? So let's let them keep them. Let them take care of them. If you start out as gated, you stay gated, because the city's not going to pay. If you start out as not gated, you're not gated. Will the property owners have more to say or votes on where the dues money is spent? Nothing changes here. Ultimately, you have say, right? Because if you had every time you had to hire a landscaper to paint a column, and you had to get a membership vote, nothing would ever happen, right? So you appoint a board, you elect a board to make the day-to-day decisions of the association. If you don't like them, the decisions you make, the remedies, get somebody else in there. Nothing changes if you do or don't adopt the POA. Will the board still be elected by property owners or homeowners? Will anything change with regards to elections, how the duration of the term? Exact same, nothing changes. That would be a change if you were changing like how you were having a term or something. That's a change to the bylaws, has nothing to do with the POA Act. POA Act wouldn't control that. Question, do rental property owners have the same vote as residential homeowners if we change to a POA? Regardless of if you're an investment company or not, members have the exact same rights, POA Act or otherwise, right? So you always have the voting rights if you were a member, the right to serve on the board, the right to vote in elections, the right to vote on amendments, anything. Regardless if you own property and you're a member, you have those rights.
Is the number of votes dictated based on the property they own? If they have
That's right. Yeah. So if you have 20 lots, you have 20 votes. Yeah. Will anything change with regards to the HOA fees? Again, nothing changes with the assessments. Question: will usage and access to our clubhouse, pool, tennis courts change, and will they be made available to non-members for a fee? POA has nothing to do with that. No change to common area. I'm not aware of any plans to let non-members use the common area for a fee. That could be done with or without the POA Act, but not aware of anything like that. Next question: will the covenants and bylaws remain the same, or will they change? If they do change, the homeowner property owners have a vote on the changes. Yeah, again, very good question. The answer is no. Nothing changes. The only change that typically comes to covenants from an amendment to adopt the POA Act is what I mentioned earlier. The maximum cap on a late fee and delinquent interest at 10%. Your covenants already say that, so there's no change. If your covenant said 18%, it would change to 10%. Any change to the covenant has to be approved by the members, right? 2/3 of the eligible voters. How will the proposed limit to number of rentals in the community to be decided? Will homeowners, property owners have a vote on this? Yeah, of course. Again, owners have the right to make this decision. It's not the board. The board can't make this decision. If the board did make this, say your covenant said the board could make this decision, it wouldn't hold up in court, right? Because the law says, no, you have to make that decision. That decision hasn't been made yet. My suggestion is probably 15%, just so you make sure that no matter what happens, that you always have enough owners that are present, whether you're an owner that lives here or you're an owner that lives somewhere else. We know how to contact you, right? Everybody here in the association knows how to contact you. If you're a shell company, we know how to contact you. Because you put your address on the Secretary of State, and who knows where that goes to. I had one last week. The address for this company was a vacant lot. All right, awesome. So no way to get it, because we send the mail and it just gets returned. There's not a mailbox there. That obviously could be a problem. Next question is, why is the POA voted connected to the initiation fee for new buyers? And who will decide the amount of this? Because you're already amending, right? Perfect time to put this in there so you all have this. Who decides? The board decides, but there's that cap on 200%. That way, we make sure that there's never a situation where, again, some hypothetical board comes in and says now initiation fee is $20,000. Your remedy at that time will be to vote them out. But again, we're going to set a cap now. 200% is very, very, it's honestly below the threshold of a lot of associations. I think it's a really fair number. You're not going to have any realtors or anybody even blink an eye at this. So that's why that's where it is. The last question I had on here was short-term rentals be limited and or prohibited. Yes, absolutely. Daily rentals are the biggest issue I hear in communities on a day-to-day basis. Because of your location, right? This is a real concern. I won't go into the horror stories of things. If you want to ask me afterwards, I'll be happy to share a couple examples of some crazy stuff I've seen Airbnbs. But yeah, you want to make sure that you're protected against that kind of stuff. So yeah,
They're not permitted now.
Yeah. Again, yeah, that's not going to change. Is what I'm saying. It's can't have Airbnbs. Don't allow those. And so again, that's all the questions I have. We did that in less than an hour. So now I'll take questions from everybody. If you will, just one question per person, so we can circle back to everybody.
Can I just start with the chat box?
Yeah, sure. All right, we'll do the chat box first, and then I'll get to everybody. If you have 5 questions, that's perfectly fine. Just let everybody else go through a turn, and come back. We'll come back.
The chat box are here.
Yeah. Well, these people are also here that may not visit Airbnb in 10. So first question I had was just to clarify additional charges, normal fees, changing from an HOA to a POA. Kind of already covered that.
Yeah, nothing changed.
Second question is, what happens if a house is sold and they haven't paid up on their dues? Is the new homeowner liable for previous charges?
Yeah, the question is, what happens if somebody sells their home and haven't paid the dues? Is the new homeowner liable? Yeah, so there's language both already in your covenants and in the POA. So again, this is not a change. But we do have a statutory lien language in the POA. That's good.
But we already have it in the covenants, right?
That's
already
correct.
there.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So what happens, just explain what happens in that situation is when somebody sells a lot, the closing attorney is supposed to reach out to the association, say how much is owed to the association, let me get a closing letter, and then at closing that amount is paid, right? And there's a procedure in place that if the closing attorney reaches out to the association and the association sits on their hands and doesn't send a letter, then it gets wiped out, right? So that's why we have to be active and make sure we do this. But if somebody doesn't request a closing letter or requests one and just simply doesn't pay it, yeah, it's what's known as joint and several liability. So we can go after both parties until the amount, either party or both parties, until the amount is paid in full. So the association is protected. And typically what happens is closing attorneys say, oh, I made a mistake. I was supposed to reach out, I didn't. So when they get notified, let us get you a check in the mail. That's my experience when dealing with this. I'll reach out to the closing attorney and say, hey, you didn't pay this at closing. Okay, let me call you right back.
Can an HOA do that?
Yeah, I'm saying I do that on behalf of the
I think
association.
the big problem in the room is that we really need to establish why we would change. Because everything that you're saying is it's just like a difference of opinion, not for me. But you're saying like, this wouldn't change, this wouldn't change. So everybody, a lot of people in the room seemingly want to know, why would we change?
Yeah, there's one reason to change.
Exactly.
The leasing
Can you establish that so we can?
Yeah, the leasing, being able to add leasing restrictions to your covenants is the only reason to
Just the
change.
leasing, right?
Yeah. And the free money. Let's not forget the initiation.
Yeah.
Collection.
Yeah. And there are other things, like I said, there's other parts to this, the statutory lien language. That, like, again, if that was missing, that would be great. But I will say this: if you're subject to the POA, a closing attorney is going to know that automatically there's a statutory lien. If a closing attorney just sees the covenants, they may not know that there's automatically a statutory lien. We still want to file our liens, right? Because, by the way, our firm charges, I think it's $25 to file a lien, so it's not like it's a big cost. The reason why, if you have a lien on something, and even if you have a statutory lien, why you would want to file that with the court It's just notice to the closing attorney. Saying, hey, there is a lien on this property. They're supposed to do their job and reach out and say, what is the amount? But in case they did it, when they go and pull the title search, they're going to see that lien, right? So that's why you do that.
Another quick question, while you're talking about this, in the cases where a bank forecloses on a property, does anything change?
Yeah, absolutely. Really good question. The question is, when there's a bank foreclosure of a mortgage, does that change anything? It actually does. That wipes out the association's lien. Now, that doesn't mean we're out of luck, because if it's a foreclosure sale, and say a bank forecloses and they're owed $100,000, and it sells at a foreclosure sale for $200,000, there's going to be what's called excess proceeds. And so when there's excess proceeds, we'll get reached out to by the firm that handles the foreclosure, and they say, hey, you may be entitled to some funds. Can you provide us with the payoff of what is owed to the association? So a lot of times, even if there's a mortgage foreclosure, the association still gets paid. That's not always the case. And so in the instance where, say, there's $500,000 owed and it sells for $100,000, right, whatever, made up numbers, our lien gets wiped out. So we no longer have a lien on the property. The personal obligation of that person that owed the debt is still there, and the association can still go after them personally. Realistically, those people typically file Chapter 7 bankruptcy because they already had their home foreclosed, and they're like, no, we're already here. So if there's not excess proceeds, a lot of time the association's lien does get wiped out, and that stinks for the association. It's just part of it, you know. But sometimes it does get paid. Jack, questions?
The next one was just you kind of just covered it. What was the reason that led to it? And of course you can clarify. We kind of touched on this in our last meeting where we spoke about the change in the act and just kind of the basic stuff that Evan shared already in those quick questionnaires. When it comes to the fees that the association collects, such as that person that always parks on their lawn and refuses to move the truck. Everybody knows what blue truck I'm talking about.
Not everybody.
Almost everybody. But in regards to that, to just homes in general, as an HOA, you are allotted by law only to collect certain fees. As a POA, you can go after that homeowner who is delinquent for all the fees, such as Evan's legal fees, past assessments on top of fines. There's more ability for you guys to make back lost income as an association. As a POA versus as an HOA, kind of like Evan was stating, you're capped at a certain point by Georgia law.
One thing I sometimes get a question on is, hey, we don't mind the investors, you know, why would we want to prevent them from coming in? Well, I've already touched on one thing, but I'll just give some real life stuff, right? So over the past 6 months, there was 4 or 5 times that the board has reached out to me over some issues in the community. Things were happening on lots that were in violation of the covenants. Every single time that was around. True. So it's just the facts, right? You all live here. You take pride in your lots. Reynolds, for whatever reason, a lot of times are where the problems come from. So we want to be able to make sure that we can act when there are problems.
Excuse me. So it's got the POA foreclosed?
Yeah, so I touched on that earlier. The language is already in your covenants now. But yes, the language is in the POA Act.
So
in those problems. Yeah, there is a threshold. It's $2,000. I never suggest the board to ever do it at $2,000. My suggestions to the board is if there's an issue in here, go after the individual, the investment company, whatever it is, through the normal procedure, right? Send out the letters, file a regular collection lawsuit. And if it's truly someone that thumbs their nose at the association, says, I'm not complying, I'm not paying, you all pay my share for me. And by the way, I'm judgment proof, meaning you can't garnish me because I don't have anything to be garnished, and all you can do is lien my property until I sell or die. Then we can have a conversation about maybe that's somebody we should look into, right? I've also had situations where pass away, and family members will use that as an opportunity, unfortunately, to either rent it or lease it and do it in a way that the association has absolutely no idea who's in the lot. And I had an association work for 13 years, I think. Somebody was in there not paying assessments, so again, everybody else is paying their share and having to pay for them. They were kind of hiding behind the death, and there was never a probated will, and there was never a deed change. So the person to go after was a dead person. So in that case, it allowed the association, because they had adopted the POA, to send out the statutory required letter saying, hey, if you don't pay, we're going to come after you. Wouldn't you know? They're like, well, what are we going to do to pay this? Oh, yeah, we've been meaning to do that. And they can't afford it, right? Because nobody wants to lose their home over a few thousand, $10,000, whatever, over that. So in the cases that I've seen where that it's actually gone to a foreclosure letter or a foreclosure suit, I've had to do that in communities over the last few years. I've not sold or had a single lot sale on the courthouse stuff. Because every single time, people are like, okay, you caught me. Yeah. I was trying to get away with this as long as humanly possible, and now I'm going to pay it. Which is sad to say, right? I don't think there's anybody here that would do that if you care enough to show up to a meeting. Right? We're not talking about you all. But in the case that something crazy like that happened, the association is protected. You all are protected. That power is there.
So can the HOA not currently do that?
Yeah, again, it's already there.
Yeah. So.
But the question was.
Yeah, like I understand the question, but I'm saying, you're saying all these things the POA can now do, but the HOA.
No, the question was, can the association foreclose? The answer is yes. Yeah. You can foreclose on it.
I think what people want to know is, how would the POA make it easier for us, for the board, to get the money they're currently owed? Like, there's tons of people out there altogether owe hundreds of thousands of dollars in unpaid dues and fees. How would the POA make it easier to recoup that?
Well, one, it's not hundreds of thousands in dues. You know, there are people that with large fine balances, right? And subjecting to the POA does have that cleaner outlay process of foreclosing, and that can be helpful, right? Because you can always foreclose, regardless of if that language was in there. And I don't want to go down a rabbit hole. You can foreclose on a lien, right? The POA helps you jump priority, and so the mortgage company doesn't have to be satisfied first. But that's not why we're doing this. Right?
So if we foreclose on the house, who gets ownership?
Whoever buys it on the courthouse does. Okay. Yeah, not the association.
Secondary question, real quick. Earlier, a question was asked concerning the proposal meeting, which was not. I didn't see a note out saying that we were going to have a proposal meeting discussing a POA change, an HOA change to the POA.
So the covenants say that you have to. The covenants say in order to amend the covenants, it has to be approved by 1/3 of the eligible votes in the association at a meeting. It says 1/3. So at the end of the voting period is a meeting where that vote can take place. But the nonprofit code provides that a voting period can be open for a maximum of 70 days, right? And so the reason why you wouldn't just say, by the way, we're voting on it the one and only day is you're not going to get passed.
So then I guess
So you want to be able to have the ability.
So then this is the proposal meeting.
There doesn't have to be. The board proposes, right? Okay. Yeah,
That was the earlier question was that there should have been a proposal meeting to discuss. So there wasn't. So
It was mentioned in online meetings, I know it's
It says in amendment and durations of declaration on page 39 of the covenants and restrictions that was
I'll read it to
amended.
for everybody if you want.
Okay, it says right here that at notice of the subject matter of a proposed amendment shall be included in the notice of the meeting of the association at which such proposed amendment is to be considered. At such meeting, a resolution adopting a proposed amendment may be proposed by either the board or by the members. Such amendment must be approved by members holding at least 1/3 of the total votes in the association, provided, however, that any amendment which materializes and adversely affects the security, title, and interest of an eligible holder must be approved by such eligible holder. So we're talking a meeting to bring about a proposal
The
of a change.
The proposal of the
It wasn't
change.
brought to a meeting.
Let me finish, please. The proposal of the change is your meeting at the end, right? I promise you.
So you gotta vote on the law before you read it?
No.
Exactly. Okay, now we take a step. Good one, I like it. That was good.
Just bear with me. I read this all day every day.
A little abject humor. There you
When
go.
you have an amendment in a community, right? It obviously goes out to you all first to decide. I want to vote yes on this, or I want to vote no on this. If you want to control leasing, you should vote yes. If you don't want to control leasing, you should vote no. It's as simple as that. The proposal is at the end of the voting period, right? And then if the members by 1/3 approve it at that meeting, the board will sign a resolution passing this. That's how it gets done. And then from there, we have to record that amendment in the county. And then once that is recorded, the second is stamped by the clerk and filed, and the deed of book page is put on there, you are then bound by the POA, not a second before. And that's the reason why, that's okay. That's the reason why we can't add the leasing restrictions right now in this amendment. It's because the POA also
Y'all,
says.
the people on the laptop can't hear with so many conversations going on.
I have a question, sir.
Let me finish if you don't mind. The POA, the POA Act says that you become subject to it once the instrument is recorded, subjecting you to it. So that's why you can't do it at the same time. I've seen that done. It's unenforceable. So if you said, we want to adopt the POA Act and we want to add leasing restrictions in the same vote, even if you said we're going to do it two separate votes, we vote on POA Act tonight and then second vote, we're going to vote on leasing, because you're not recording that first, not by you. Question?
No, I have to finish this. In 2000, the initial master condition of the covenants restrictions was done with 67% of the community. In 2007, in the first amendment to that, it was done by 2/3, 67% of the community. In 2018, another one was done with 67% of the community. How come in this one we're down to 1/3 opposed to 2/3?
Very good question. The question is, why did the amendment provision change? It's because in that last one that you're talking about that was approved by 67% of the members, that amendment document that was approved by them said we're now changing it to 1/3. Yeah.
Because it's hard to get people to vote.
Yeah. And so in theory is, right, and if you didn't talk to an attorney like me, in theory you would say, okay, great, well now we can add these leasing restrictions or whatever by 1/3. And the law says, and by the way, this isn't like, the law used to be that you could do that. And the Court of Appeals stepped in and said, no, you cannot do this. You can't go off changing the restrictions.
The 2018 version, which was the last one that was done, they didn't put that in, that they changed 2/3 to 1/3.
No, it's that amendment provision that you read out, that's where that change was, yeah. It changed from two.
Yeah, it says to propose, it didn't say to amend, it says to propose.
Right, the proposal is, here is this proposed amendment.
You're voting on the proposal.
Vote on
right
this
now.
proposed amendment. Question?
Please excuse me, I apologize to all of y'all. I just want to clarify for my simple mind. Alright, so I am understanding that the purpose of this meeting is to educate us on POA.
Yes.
You are paid by the board to educate us on the positiveness of the POA. Wait a minute, I haven't finished, sir. My second question, my question is, all I've heard is positive. I've not heard any negative, and I've heard you step up to the plate and say, I don't understand why you would not want to do this. So this obviously is a very good representation of the POA. I have seen signs promoting the POA. So obviously, there is a push to have a POA. Our votes are sent to Century
which is our contractor to run our HOA. So how do I know, as a very naive housewife with 2 master's degrees, who is now the head of my household, as my husband just died, and thank you for approving to let his healthcare workers who come to my house be able to park on the street and quit tipping us. But my question to you is, how do I know that I can trust you? You have done nothing to tell me that I can trust you, because you've not given me information to balance the equation. I have seen signs that probably came out of our homeowners' doers to pay for this. And now they're soliciting, which is against our covenants and rules. So if you're willing to say it's a good thing to have a POA, and we want you to have it, matter of fact, we're investing in that campaign, and now you're saying that it's only going to take 1/3 of the members of our 2 communities to say we can pass this, and voting started Saturday. I have my vote here. How do I know that it's going to be counted? I mean, this obviously isn't, fair and balanced. It's not a fair and balanced ballot, and I'm really pretty concerned that my vote is not going to get counted. That because we voted 2 days ago, that 1/3 of votes of people who are pro this are going to say, oh yeah, we're the majority, we're going to win. If this was a presidential election, somebody would be contesting it. But, my point is, how can I trust?
Count the votes.
Yeah, so let me address this if you don't mind. All right, so one, you got Century that's going to facilitate the county balance. Century doesn't care if you're POA or not, right? My job as one of the attorneys for the association is to tell the board what I think is in the best interest of the association. The board's job is to make decisions that it thinks are in the best interest of the association. Anytime you ever have an amendment in an association, it's going to be proposed by the board, right? Because unless there's some crazy scenario where members come together and request a special meeting to make changes to the covenants, which never happened. I represent over 500 associations throughout the state of Georgia. I haven't seen it once in years and years. But you haven't done so, right? So there hasn't been a proposed amendment from the members to do this. So the board is saying, hey, please vote on this. Yes, I absolutely, in my own opinion, think you should protect yourself from investment companies and make sure that you can control that. If you feel otherwise, vote no. Yeah, absolutely. But it's up to you, right? So my opinion doesn't matter because I don't get a vote in this, right? But I think it is important to protect yourself. Question.
So, sorry. What are your concerns? Do you work for the leasing company? What's wrong with it for you? I don't know who was speaking about the Zambia. What is wrong with it? I would love to know.
I can't hear you. I'm sorry.
What is wrong with it? Why are you so angry?
I'm not angry. I am a person that likes to see both sides.
I want a specific answer. What is wrong with it?
She's trying to give you this. All right. Calm down.
My name is TJ Hammonds Benedict, and I live at 456 Copper Creek Circle. And this is my answer. Okay. I have done research, and I have read both sides of the arguments. And I am always a person who makes a judgment based on research.
So what's
wait a minute, you asked for you wouldn't know my answer. This is my answer, ma'am. I respect your right to disagree.
You have no idea how important I'm just asking.
I know, I'm going to give you my answer if you let me finish speaking. My answer is, I have sat here, I have listened, and I've read. And I have heard nothing but POA does this, this, and this. And then I hear, well, we can add that to the HOA. Why change a system? Because of the law. You can amend anything, man. I can. That's what I say. Georgia law. Georgia law says that if we have a POA, what will it do for you? It will protect you from 20% more people. My question here is, if I want to get them to big, how many lots can be built up in these two neighborhoods?
We're full up.
How many more lots can be built?
We're full.
Zero. So no more lots can be built, correct?
Correct.
20% in the arbors is owned by American. Just
20 lots.
So I'm assuming that that is the highest amount of lots. Wait a minute, please. Okay? I'm sure you've done other research to see how many other companies have rental properties. Okay? I know that on my street, there are rental properties.
Yes.
And I know that on my street, they are maintained very well.
Some
And
not.
here's
Some
the
not.
news.
It's not about maintenance.
I know it's not. It's about ownership, sir. And I have a friend who is on the board of Southbridge. And they're facing the same thing we are. Great American Homes and other companies are coming in because the Hyundai plant is being built. Okay?
So we should be proactive.
I understand your concern. Okay, I very much understand your concern. But all I have heard is why I should vote.
Well, why
And
should
that-
I know what you, since you researched what you
Why shouldn't I vote no, or why shouldn't I vote yes? Is that your question, ma'am?
Yes.
Yeah. Why am I upset? What's bad about it? What's bad about it?
It protects your property.
Does it? Yes. Seriously? Yes. And that's for you saying that it's gonna protect my property. Okay, I get it.
We'll move on to some questions.
Let's just move on.
Yeah. The purple right here. I think he had a lot. Okay. The purple. Order!
Wait. Okay, so my question is this. I do have fear about the leasing thing that's happening. Thank you for reminding everyone here that Hyundai is about 10 miles up the road. So we can expect that we're like a little gold mine to these companies that want to buy houses and rent them out. Okay? They're never going to live here. They don't care about you. They don't care about me. They care about their pockets. And so that's all they're going to be concerned about. They don't care who moves in. It doesn't matter. Now, what I'd like to ask is this. So these homes, these companies, I think my question. Go ahead. Just wait, you can ask your question. So, once these companies, or even an owner, if I rent my property and that lease expires, and now we have the new program that we're not going to have more than 15% of rental properties, right? Does that home then become a permanent, like they can rent that thing over and over and over again? And it's like that never changes.
Yeah, that's why it's important to act before you're at
Because I do think
a
that's
percentage, right? Because that's what I was talking about earlier when I said the amount until it's sold for $100. The law says if you add a leasing restriction, this is actually, by the way, directly in the POA Act. So if you look at the amendment provision in the POA Act, it says this. If you are adding a leasing restriction, anyone who's leasing at the time of the amendment, you cannot prevent them from continuing to lease until that lot is sold for $100. So they're grandfathered in, that's right. And we've always put a grandfather clause in any type of leasing restriction because it's all this coming, right? And it makes a whole lot of sense, right? If you're leasing at the time of amendment, you shouldn't be able to, they shouldn't be able to kick your tenant out, right? Because you've always had that right. They can't take that right away from you just by amending your covenants. The other side of the coin is that, again, if you get to a certain percentage, you can't force them out, right? And so you have to wait and try to see if they sell the lots to where you can get the votes. But once you're leasing, you can continue to lease until you sell it for $100. Now, the difference is if once it's passed, if someone comes in that doesn't currently own or isn't leasing at the time of the amendment, then they're going to have to play by those rules. That's why it's important to go ahead and put it in place, that residency requirement. America's Homes, for instance, the 20 lots in the Arbors, they're going to continue to be able to lease those lots until they sell them for $100, regardless of what we put in. If America's Home, for instance, buys another lot, that restriction is going to be in place. All right. Coming to you next, the very back.
The question, what's the success rate for your firm to recover funds?
Do what?
What's your success rate to recover funds fees from your firm?
The question is completely different from this, but the question is, what's our success rate of collecting funds? There's no like set rate, but I'll say this: we've come in a lot of communities that were in dire straits and basically put ourselves out of business. We represent associations on a contingency fee because what we found when we started this is a lot of firms weren't motivated to collect the money because they billed hourly to do the collections, and they would get sent a bill to collect on that was $1,000 and then send a bill back to the association for $1,500. It's like, well, that doesn't make any sense for the association. So we do it in a way where it aligns our interests with the association, where the only way we get paid on a collection account is if we actually collect the money. We get a percentage of that. And then we ask the court to add that percentage back to a judgment so that the association, that can help offset the fees for the association. But the answer is successful. If someone works a job or has a bank, and they don't have the federal protections in place, we're going to be successful eventually with that foreclosure power. If it got to that, that's another way to be super successful and make sure that.
Yeah, but give us a number. Give us the numbers.
There's not a number. I can't say that we're 70% successful on an account.
I'm going to speak as a former treasurer of the
Oh, this
association.
guy's got a
Right back
question.
here. Right back here.
Yeah.
If the law changes, do our bylaws or covenants change to match the law automatically? Do we have to vote to readjust, or how does that flow?
So, if you are bound by the statutes, you are bound by them and any amendments to them. It's a very good question. If there's a proposed change to the law, you most of the time know ahead of time. But the way the POA Act is laid out, there's not, read through it, right? There's a lien for assessment provision. There is assessment provision. There's an amendment provision. There's this.
Yeah,
it's not like. Do what?
Let's say those percentages go to shit. Like say this, the law, somebody goes back and the legislation looks at the law and says, hey, economically, we're going to assess based on some percentage. It kind of gives people more freedom to do that as a lobbying group, collect money and increase the amount, or no matter what.
Okay, yeah.
Right?
So
how does that govern us if we're 10% and the law is 15?
yeah, that's a really good question. All right, so it says a maximum of 10%. So if the legislator said now the maximum for a late fee is set what the maximum delinquent interest rate is by law, otherwise 18%, and they go up to 18%. Well, that's the maximum. Your covenants say 10%, so that the covenants would still control, unless you wanted as a membership to change that. The board wouldn't have that power to change it because that is an actual change in what the percentage are. If it said, if they changed for some reason and said it's now automatically 15% guaranteed, well, that would change the covenants. They don't do it like that. They set maximums for things to like that.
Say there was a like your covenants in your community 50%, the law does stuff, the covenants control that, or not.
No, if it's a maximum, you're going to be subject to the maximum.
So they can never, the community can never like set higher and
than 10%. The community can't set it higher than 10%. 10% is a fair number. All right, you've had your hand up for a while.
How many homes here are delinquent?
I don't know off the top of my head.
And what's the percentage of renters?
I don't know that off the top of my head. But it's very, you can fit, you go to the tax assessor's website. If you want to look it up, it's order. The question is,
How do we know we're not at that maximum?
so the question is, how do you know you're not at the maximum? It doesn't matter what you're at now. You can set a maximum, right? And then over time, so say the number is 18% now, and you set up 15% maximum. And then what I'm talking about is a 15% maximum cap on the number of lots that could be leased at any one time. You would set it at 15%, and often I have this as the case. The communities like at 20% rentals, and they set it at 15%. Over time, as those lots sell and fall off, it'll drop below the 15%, and then new leasing permits will be available. In the meantime, you have the hardship permit that has no cap, by the way, right? That's there for the members. Does that answer the question?
You mentioned earlier that there was somebody in another association that purchased property, asked for that hardship because they were an investment company and realized they couldn't, they sold the home. Who is going to be monitoring that an investment company does purchase here, and what if they don't want to play by the rules that are in place? What is the procedure for that?
Yeah, so the question is how do we make sure that the investment company plays by the rules? We have a couple ways of figuring that out, right? The first is when a closing letter is ordered. If it says AM4 Homes LLC, we know what that is, right? And so, by the way, company, did you know that our covenants provide that you have to have lived in the community, in the lot for a year in order to lease? Okay, probably gonna back up. If they somehow got through the closing process and purchased the property, right? Well, then they're gonna have to give their contact information to Century. Century's gonna see that, right? Or it's on the tax assessor's website. We see that too, right? The ownership can't be hidden in the name of the entity. So if it's John Smith, we know it's John Smith. If it's an LLC, we know that's most likely a rental. It doesn't have to be, right? Because you could put your home in a trust or something like that and still live in it. That doesn't mean necessarily that you're going to be renting it out. But there's ways of figuring it out eventually. And then from there, we can, hey, you've been doing this without approval, we'll address it. Question right behind you.
Yeah, I live in Copper Bridge. And let me tell you something. I don't have any data. You don't have to be right. But you guys did a crappy job. That's the problem here. That's why most of us don't trust me. Because the way it's set up and you're pushing for this, I mean, instead of explaining the pros and cons, you know what I'm saying?
Then you should run for the board.
Hey, I'm talking.
You have to be.
You guys got your little group there, making decisions for, I don't know. It didn't happen.
Okay, I'm just gonna make a statement.
Let me finish.
No, this room is about being respectful and question.
And I respect you because she was very disrespectful to her.
Sir, hold
And
on.
during big,
Sir,
during
you're now
big shit.
disrespecting me.
No, during
Nobody
big
else.
shit. She said something to her. So go sit down and let me finish.
That's all I'm asking.
Yeah,
but where was you when she disrespected her?
I want everyone to stop disrespecting me.
That's what they did.
We can't have order in here, we will.
And then they don't put it forth in yet. Your board has not done that. And in those situations, the amendments don't pass. And then what happens from there? Everything continues as usual. Right? So, and that's, if you all decide we're fine with investment companies, that's totally your decision, right? And make that decision. If you want to forbid, I'm telling you, this is how you do it, right? And so the board is trying to ask you, please vote in favor of this because we think it is in the best interest of the association. That is their job, right? And so instead of just mailing it to you and asking you to vote on it, which would have failed 100%, right? I have done 50 of these in the last 3, 4, 5, 6 years, right? Every single time, with the exception of like 2 communities that had 17 lots. And everybody knew everybody. They didn't need to hold meetings. They didn't need to have informational sessions. They didn't need to have signs. Please vote on this. Hey, this is super important. Hey, we want to have the attorney come here and speak and tell you why he thinks it's important for us to do this. In all those communities, it fails every single time. And so the board is telling you and informing you with why we're wanting to do this, why they think it's in the best interest, why I personally think it's in the best. I actually care about your community. I really do, right? I've been here a few times. I like it. You all show up to meetings, which is rare, right? You all care about your lots. That's important. In my personal opinion, as someone who does this every single day, I think it is important because I have every single week boards that have issues with investment companies, and they want to step in and address it, and they're a lot of times not able to do so. So I encourage my boards, please, please, please put forth an effort to get this thing passed, because if you don't, it will not pass. So that's why you see the signs,
And I get
that's
that.
why you see this and here tonight.
I get that part, but the problem is you need to, the same thing you think, your opinion, this is what we should be doing. You need to understand our skeptical thing.
Yeah, and so that was the whole purpose of me to.
Please, can you just, yeah, you're always commenting something, just be quiet and let me finish. And that's why I'm okay. Every time somebody is in opposition about that, somebody has to say something and attacking them instead of educating
So
them.
we get that also from
You
the
see,
other
I
side.
get that, but
No,
you have
you've
to do
already
it.
spoken and then continue. The board is being transparent
Just
with
stop
the
the BS.
community.
That's what you need to
Okay?
do.
What you said makes sense.
Ma'am?
Okay, going to what he said, what the lady said. The problem is like she said, we are voting in this, but where was the proposed meeting?
We're not voting.
Second, when the percentage of 2/3 of us approving something changed now for 1/3.
It
We
was
haven't voted.
in the
That was in the past.
The amendment that was.
It's already done.
That's when that changed.
6 years ago.
So,
6 years ago.
2018, that's when that changed.
Okay, so she asked that question and none of you said in 2018 that changed. I didn't hear. And that's the problem, because like she said, it sounds good, but it sounds like you are pushing it too, because like I said, everything has pros and cons. And regardless, we're supposed to be respectful here, even though if you don't like that someone's supposed to, you're not supposed to be disrespectful to anybody. So we are adults here with different opinions. We are here to be educated and then go and make the decision that we think that is right for us. So we're not here for no one being judging us or disrespecting us.
That is the goal.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, put the cap on the number of leases is the main reason to change over to the POA. Why don't we know how many leases and renters we currently have in the community? We have not got a great percentage on any question that has been asked in these hearings.
Nick, I would like to address that.
Please.
Okay. We have a requirement in this community for every purchaser of a house that intends to rent the house to submit within 10 days of signing of a lease to turn that over to Century. When I was treasurer last year, I asked them, how many do we have? How many of these do we have? And we had like a dozen. We had many more leases out there than a dozen leases.
Yes, I know.
So we started working, the board met and had a long discussion on the whole process of this. And the bottom line was, is it's going to cost us as a community a tremendous amount of money to identify who has leases and who doesn't have leases and police that basically to make sure that leases are being filed. And the return on that is zero because we have no way of controlling leases. If we found out that 50% of our community.
What's going to be different with POA?
Okay.
Put a cap on it.
We can put a cap on it. So, okay, your question about how we don't understand. When someone files that they're going to, when they don't live in their house, okay, we have 897 homes that we have records on, that we keep profiles on because we have who owns the house, and then they have an address of the house, and then they have the address that the owner lives at. And so you would think that it would be very simple. You go through and you say, okay, well, if the address of the home is not the address of who owns it, regardless of what that address is, those are leases. That would be easy. Problem is that in many cases, and this is from my personal experience with as treasurer, when we have fines or we're trying to collect on dues or such, and we send letters to the home. We send letters. Finally, we get the attorney involved because the numbers keep going up. And then we find out that the owner hasn't received a single letter because they don't live there. They're leasing it to someone else who lives there. And we finally discover that through a whole series of things, but I'm not going to get into that. Bottom line is that we have no way of knowing if I rent my home and I don't turn in any paperwork, there's no way for them to understand. If I claim that I live there, but I don't really live there, those people can we have several lots like that in the community. Once we find them, then we can convert, we get the proper information, that we get the right emails to send the information to, and so on and so forth. But this is a problem that we face. To correct that problem takes management, it takes dollars to correct that problem, and if there's no way of enforcing it or doing anything about it, then there's no sense in even counting how many people we have that are leasing. We do.
What's the reason for the change over there? If we don't have a system in place to track how many renters or how many leases we have, then what's the problem? I mean,
let me address that.
reason for the change?
So you'll put one in place, right? And so you'll put one in place, and then an enforcement mechanism if someone leases without approval. So right now, here's how you could determine exactly who's leasing, so long as everyone told the truth. You could send out, the board could adopt a rule, and I've had communities do this, kind of against advice, where they establish a rule and require every single person in the community to provide who's living in the lot, if they're leasing, yes or no, and then establish fines for failing to do that. Why would we want to do that? Because then you all got to respond to this, and then if you don't respond, you're going to get fined every single day for not responding until you respond to it. And then, it was lost in the mail, and I got $400 in fines, and then the association is bogged down with trying to do it, and then we find out exactly who's leasing, and then, great, we know how many he's leasing, but what do we do about it, right? So it doesn't matter. Because there's no enforcement mechanism, there's no cap in place. If you establish a cap in place and someone violates that, right? So we'll obtain the leasing information. They'll have to apply for a permit. And then if they don't apply for a permit, they'll be fined, right? And so there'll be a situation, an established procedure in place to make sure that the association can control the leasing and know who's leasing in the community. Right now, you don't have that. You could establish that, spend thousands of dollars in time and money to do that, but there's no enforcement mechanism in the covenants right now to stop it, right? So you wouldn't want to do that. You can go on your tax assessors and see and very easily find out the investment companies who are leasing, because like I said, it's these LLCs that we know.
So it would be such a big burden to meet that 2/3% to change anything in the covenant if we needed to. So we resorted to making it 1/3 of the votes, not realizing that it should have been worded a little better, because now I have an issue with the vote. And if you guys want to know, I pass on to the board 4 pages with 56 questions separated by vote, liens, leasing restrictions, and amendments to the covenants. Okay? So if those questions are answered honestly, most people will walk out of here with the balance of pros and cons and could make an educated decision on their vote. I don't know if we're going to be able to address that in the time that is allotted now. The other thing is, because I know how the bulletin board can be monitored and censored, I have resorted to social media, mostly Nextdoor, to voice my opinion and provide some data regarding the POA vote. I ask you to please look at that link. I know I got over 960 hits on that post alone. So I know that people have seen it. I can provide any answers on the history of the board, the finances, how many properties we were tracking at the time when I was treasurer, because I was tracking that on a monthly basis, how many delinquencies we had for homeowners, what those amounts were. That's when Dunlap and Gardner came in, because the previous law firm was not aggressive enough to collecting those liens. So we contracted you guys, have a different model, and we're more aggressive. And I know that you guys have brought that number down from what it was, which was hundreds of thousands of dollars. And that success rate tells me that you guys are being compensated properly. And I have a question as to why you would, I understand that you suggest to the board to control the leases to go to the POA, but you're affecting your own income by doing that, because now the liens will be handled by Sentry, I assume, because the Sentry is the manager of all the property. They have to keep track of it. They have to provide the data. You don't have any data on the homeowners.
I'll let you go back, but I just want to address one thing. You got to be an attorney to file liens. So Sentry can't file the liens. But go back.
Okay, so a couple of statements that you made, and I think that one of the most important ones was one that was asked several times at the last board meeting, general meeting. If we are proclaiming all these savings and revenue from the POA, adopting the POA and adopting this new joining fee, like if we were a country club, or this joiner's fee, it has been stated several times that the homeowners will not see any benefit to the dues that are due every year, because it is up to the board in the current covenants and whatever the POA says to manage whatever income they have the way they see fit. And every time that we have additional revenue, regardless if it's collections or fees or whatever, it has never been reflected in any reduction in dues. It has always been increased. As a matter of fact, in the last 2 years alone, we have been hit with 27% one year, and then another 4-point-something% the second year. So we don't see our dues reduced. We don't see any savings that are being proclaimed as great savings and great source of revenue. We don't get any promises. I mean, it was actually said at the last meeting that we will not see any reductions in dues due to all these savings.
Can I get you to pause 1 second before I forget everything you said? Because you're saying a lot. I want to address some of it, and then we'll come back to you. One, I wish you would have sent me these before so I could address them. I try to address every question the association had. That's why I didn't skip any questions. I'm not trying to win. We weren't a part of the amendment provision the last time, right? You said the attorney said not to do it then.
No, they recommended not to do it.
Okay. Well, that wasn't our firm. If it would have been our firm, I would have told you absolutely yes, right? Because what I would have said is your 1/3 doesn't matter, right? So yes, you can change and lessen the restrictions. Why would you want to do that? Why would you want to allow people to have pink houses, right? Whatever the case may be, by 1/3. But if you're going to add a greater restriction, you got to be subject to the POA first, right? So I would have said at that time, please go ahead and add this as a part of that. And by the way, I'm sure it would have got passed because it was a full amendment and restated. And I think it would have been. I'm not.
It was. That's all hypothetical, and it's done. It's gone.
Yeah.
The covenants are there the way they are. So going back to
what you mentioned about the liens, like I said, you got to be an attorney to file a lien. The Sentry can't do that. So This doesn't affect our costs in one way or the other.
I know the whole process for the current lien process with Sentry and stuff. Now, as a member of the
Simone, let me ask you a question. When you posted your comments on Next Door Neighbor and said you had 3 pages of questions, did I not invite you to email them to our forum or to us or anybody? And so we could prepare and answer your questions? Did I?
You did, but
and you did.
If you look at don't shut me down first before I finish. I did not, because all the information was not there at the time. The package with the vote and the wording that I was asking for at that time had not been provided. This list is based on the last mailing with all the details that I was originally asking, and I have additional questions there. Okay?
We would have liked to have your 3 pages that you had at that time a month ago.
A lot of those questions were deleted because they were answered with the information in the packet.
2 hours.
Please, I am asking you, please do not shut me down before I can finish what I wanted to say. Because it gets into this personal thing and attack that it's not needed. I'm just asking, just let me finish. Just give me 2 more minutes. 2 more minutes and I'm done. 2 more minutes and I'm done. Okay? So at the time when we were talking about rentals, like I said, I was keeping track of rentals that were less than 100, but they were definitely more than the 57 that you're mentioning right now. And we asked that question, how can we improve tracking rentals? And we asked Sentry to give us a quote as to what it would take to track rentals with Sentry, because they're, like I said, they are the keepers of the data and the records of who is in the neighborhood. And it was determined at the time that it was too costly to have that done. Now, if we adopt the POA in order to be able to adopt the leasing restriction, we have to be voted on later on. Sentry has to be involved. So the Sentry aspect has not changed, and it's going to be still costly.
How does Sentry have to be involved?
Right. So hold on. Let me address this.
So how are you going to keep track
Can I
of
answer that question? Yeah.
He's drawing a line right here. That's what we're doing.
So you don't adopt an amendment for leasing restrictions and then say, like I said before, spend the money in occupancy survey. People are just lie, right? You will find out eventually who is leasing and who's not, right? And so if someone is in violation of the covenants, you have the authority and the ability to address that. You can obviously check it in closing and make sure that you don't have investment companies continue to come in here and prevent that. That's the prevention part of this. The enforcement part of this is, if I'm leasing my lot, I buy in here, or I've been here and I lease without approval, and you find out, the board finds out, they then have a mechanism to enforce that against me for doing what I'm not supposed to do, right? Right now, the board does not have, the association does not have that authority. So we would like to add that so the association can actually do something about it. Right now, if we did it, again, everybody tell us if you're leasing or not. Okay, great, we know.
So
but that doesn't do anything.
My question to you is, so when it comes to liens and leases under the POA, who is going to be the manager of all that data and all that information? Is it going to be Dunlap Gardner or is it going to be Sentry?
No, we're not the manager.
Who manages the data? Who's the recorder of the data?
We identify leases and we note them, and Sentry will have the records in the
Okay,
community
so,
portal.
and that's what I'm saying, so.
But what you're getting at is the cost for it, right? So the cost that Sentry was talking about is going out there and finding out who was leasing and then maintaining.
It was more than that. It was not only finding out who's leasing, but managing all the fines and notifying the homeowners, notifying the tenants as well, because our current covenants cover everything of how we can find the homeowners and the tenants, and how we can even evict tenants if they don't pay the
eviction part is not realistic, I have to be honest with you. But you know, you're talking about.
This was agreed to with the lawyers when we saw those covenants. So we had legal advice for that.
I'm just telling you, somebody does it every day. It's not because oftentimes, let me give you a real life part of that, right? So we got a problem tenant in the community who's causing all kind of problems in the association, and you have the power of it. I'm the owner, and I say, "What? I'm getting rich." But they're causing tearing up the house. And the association evicts and pays for it. Thanks. I'll get somebody else. Oh, you got the bad tenant out. Thanks for doing my job for me. Right? You paid for it instead of me paying for it. and then I can just put in a bad tenant again, right? And the association doesn't, and that's the real life part of the eviction part, where when boards come to me, they're like, we have this eviction power. I'm like, okay, great. What happens if they put their brother in the next day, right? It doesn't do anything.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. My arm was really tired. I have a couple of questions, please, and I would like to thank you for putting down a whole list of questions.
Good.
But I do want to clarify something for the folks in the room. Because this is the largest crowd I've ever seen at homeowners meeting. So it always gives to show up when there's a problem, something big that's happening.
Yeah.
Okay, so while I have your attention, you talked about the in the covenants previously for years and years and years. We had in there a safeguard for the homeowners as far as the annual assessments could not be raised more than 10% in a 12-month period. Okay? So then people can kind of budget, based on what they currently pay. A couple of years ago, we took a big jump. That's when I noticed, hey, that 10% piece fell out when they redid the covenants.
Yeah.
I think that is a very important piece to have in the covenants because there was a lot of uproar when we went from $550 a year to $700. Okay, and I know that it's only because we didn't go up every year like we really probably should.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I have nothing against these folks, but in the future there could be a bad board, and if there's no percentage in the covenants, they could raise your annual assessment however much they want to.
Yep.
You said earlier that it typically is based on the budget.
That's right.
Okay, but you also said that we are paying for the people who don't pay. Okay, so.
If you don't have the way to enforce against them.
Okay, so if the people that aren't paying, I'm now paying for them, and there's no cap every 12 months, that's a problem.
So,
to me.
so in theory, I absolutely agree with you. That sounds good, but you hit the nail on the head with what you said. Is boards come in place, and their job is to take the issues from prior boards that they have, right? And the real life part of that is, I'm sure your grocery costs, your gas costs, everything has gone up drastically over the last couple of years, right? Everybody's has, right? So it's gone up more than 10%. The dollar's not worth it. Same thing, right? And so the association, like everything else, has to be able to react to that. And so if we have a cap in place, what happens if there is a board that didn't go up on it for 5 or 10 years, and they were just barely making ends meet, and they weren't forward thinking, and they didn't have a reserve in place, and then all of a sudden the association's costs double, and there's no money to do it, and they're only capped at 10% to go up, and the association could, in theory, go bankrupt, right? And so that's when your pool closes. That's when we don't have air conditioning here and we have problems. And I've seen it. I'm not just saying this, because if I had boards and I'm the attorney forever, God willing, and we got a board just like this one that's on top of it and paying attention and being smart with the money, then your 10% cap would absolutely be a good idea.
Okay.
But if they're not, then the association's in a rock and a hard place. So in your position, in your situation that you talked about, where the board goes off and increases it above what they should, right? The association's remedy is to petition for a special meeting and kick them out. And say, we want a board in here that's going to actually budget the money the right way. And if they go up on the assessments for 30%, when the cost would only go up 5%, they're not funding, and they're going off and having steak dinners every night, then you need to kick them out. That's not what this board's doing.
Well, okay, so in anybody's budget, you look at what you have to pay out, and then the things that don't necessarily, need to be done this year, like, hey, I can't afford a new car. Okay, so I'm not getting a new car because it's not in my budget. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
So if we
we didn't plan on the pool cost being that much, so now we have to raise the dues, and now you're $1,500 a year. And I'm just using that as a figure, alright? Now, let's tie that into the initiation fee. I'm selling my house, but I can't pay $1,500 a month, and there are people that, you know, only can budget what we currently have or a little bit more. But if a board gets a $1,500 a year, and that initiation fee is no more than 200%, that's a $3,000 fee that you are asking a new buyer to pay. And I'm not against initiation fees, okay? My point is, I think that we need to go back to the cap on annual assessments to safeguard everybody in this community. And I don't think that they realize that is no longer in the covenants. It was in the covenants for years and years and years. So.
Yeah, again, in your scenario, you know, I represent the association for the board of directors. I'm giving you legal advice here. But in that scenario, that if a board is acting out and increasing the assessment, and it has nothing to do with the budget, and they're not doing what they're supposed to do, vote them out. Call a special meeting and kick them out, kick them off the board. That is your right and remedy as the association. Your bylaws provide for what the special meeting requirement is. It's not going to take 2/3, right? Because that's not.
Yeah. It's going to take 2/3 because, you know, again, we're at 900 homes.
So your bylaws provide a special meeting requirement, right? There's a threshold that needs to be made. I can't remember that off the top of my head. It was typically somewhere around 25%. It's a pretty low standard. And then from there, it's a majority of the quorum, right? And the reason why that protection and safeguard is in place is just for the scenario you get at, right? If you have a board, even though you have an annual election each year, let's say you have a board, and there's been some crazy ones. There was a case a county over that I found out about from a board, a client we took on from 10 years ago. A board president was paying his son or son-in-law something to do the landscaping, buying landscaping equipment with the association funds, paying his wife to run the books, and it came to over $50,000 a year in a pretty small association. And guess what happened? And they sued, or the court actually removed it. And the court said, no, that's not happening, right? And so there are safeguards in place to protect from exactly what you were saying. The important, why I would suggest, and again, if the members want to add that to the next one, then that's up to the members, right? But for this one, we're already here. We already have to propose and vote on this now. I would suggest against it for that scenario of making sure that the board can be flexible. And by the way, if the costs don't go up, the board has that flexibility to keep them where they're at, or sometimes even reduce, right? So if we get $100,000 in initiation fees, our reserves are fully budgeted. We talked about what you could spend the initiation fees on. Well, that could help pay for some of the costs of managing the leasing, right? This is extra funds that you don't have now that you're going to have access to. So all these things add up. But I would advise against that simply because I've seen associations be handicapped and not be able to act, and then try to have to amend their covenants by a high standard just to change, to remove the cap on the 10%. I had one, honestly, it was like 3 months ago. And the board and management company came to me, and there were a new board that came on, and the prior board wasn't paying attention. And this was in a really nice community, in a pretty big community. And the assessments hadn't gone up in 20 years. And they said our costs have quadrupled, and we don't have any money. And the lights are about to get shut off. What do we do? And I said, well, you can go up on your covenants by, that allowed them to go up. It was based on an inflation rate. It allowed them to go up $23. And they said, well, that was going to be a total of about $5,000. And we need $50,000 like right now. Your covenants don't